case against you beyond a reasonable doubt. And one of those is that Grant Hayes caused the death of Laura Ackerson, and that Grant Hayes has been, I believe he's indicated that he may acknowledge and has acknowledged that Grant Hayes has been found guilty of the killing of Laura Ackerson. When you plead not guilty, you deny every element of the offense charged, and one of the elements of the offenses charged deals with that Laura Ackerson was killed intentionally with premeditation, liberation, with malice, and with regard to the accessory after the fact to that homicide, that you in some way knew that and assisted Mr. Hayes in his attempt to escape discovery and conviction. So the state has to prove first that Grant Hayes actually killed Laura Ackerson. And when your lawyer acknowledges that that occurred, then you have acknowledged, at least he or your counsel have acknowledged an element of the crime charged. I will not let them do that unless it's with your permission and you believe it's in your best interest. Do you understand what I've said?
Yes,
okay. Have you talked with them about that in terms of the best way in which you should defend yourself?
Yes, Your Honor.
And do you feel like that is something that would be in your best interest?
Yes, sir.
And do you authorize them to make that concession to the jury in their opening remarks?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Again, the court finds that that the defendant has made a knowing, intelligent decision to allow her attorneys to acknowledge certain facts that may constitute an element of the crime charged, and she believes it's in their best interest. I concur that it certainly would be a factor that the jury may view in her best interest if she acknowledged that, and therefore I will permit the attorneys to make that representation to the jury if they so choose. Can you release the remaining jurors, please? The ones that came back in the event we needed to select further jurors. There was some reference to stipulations. Do you need to put that in the record now, or you want to do it later? I don't know how y'all want to do that, but
if we could maybe do that at the end of the day or first thing in the morning.
that's fine. Anything that would be necessary to put in the record before we impanel the jury? Sure. Fine. That's fine. There being nothing further, then it appears that we can bring the jurors in, impanel the jury, and have opening statements. Who will be speaking on behalf of the state? Who will be speaking on behalf of the defendant? Okay. Y'all have some idea how long you'll be?
I would say 15 or 20 minutes.
Okay.
Probably about the same.
Okay. Right. Bring jurors, please. Okay, great, thank you. Afternoon, folks. Let me so thank you for the patience that you've shown during this rather extensive jury selection process, which is now complete. Gina, please show on the record that all the 12 original jurors and the 3 alternate jurors are now present in the courtroom and now seated in the jury box. When you came in, you found a notepad and a pen and a badge. I know you're on the jury, but we want everybody else to know you're on the jury too. So if you would throughout the course of this trial, wear that red badge that shows that you're a juror whenever you're out and about, whether you're out to lunch or on the elevator, in the lobby, or anywhere. That way, people will know that you're not here as just a member of the public today. You have a much more important role, and they will be careful not to talk around you and innocently say something or say something to somebody else in your presence on the elevator or otherwise that might influence your verdict or question your integrity. So that's just your notice to the world that you're a juror, and for the rest of the world to be careful what they say and do around you. And if you would do that, please. If you misplace your badge, let us know that both will find you one. Please, if you'll wear those, it will be helpful to you and to us while you're here. Madam Clerk, can you please impanel the jury?
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, you are duly sworn and are now on panel to hear the evidence when the state of North Carolina versus Amanda Hayes. Sit together, hear the evidence, and render your verdict accordingly.
Ladies and gentlemen, that's the technical way we begin the lawsuit. As the clerk has said, you've been sworn, you're now on panel to try the issues in the case. You'll sit together, hear the evidence, and render your verdict accordingly, according to the evidence as you find it to be true, and according to the rules of law that I'll explain to you in great detail at the end of this trial. You must be at all times fair, objective, and impartial. You can't take sides. You have to call it the way the law requires, irrespective of how that means it will come out. Don't listen to what the first witness has to say about it and make your mind up. Listen to the first and then set it aside. Evaluate the testimony and then set that aside and listen to the next and the next and the next. But please don't make any final conclusions in your mind till you've heard all the evidence in the case, you've heard my instructions on the law, and you have retired to begin your deliberations. The rules of the court also require, and I don't make the rules, the Supreme Court does, they require that you not discuss the case at all among yourselves. I think one of the reasons for that rule is when you start talking about it, you start making up your mind about it, and they want to make sure you do not make your mind up until you have heard it all. And so please do not discuss the case among yourselves until such time as you've heard all the evidence, you've heard my instructions on the law, and you retire to begin your deliberations. Do not talk about it, don't form any opinions about it, and do not discuss it at all. Be mindful of my previous instructions to you. The defendant, Amanda Hayes, having been charged with murder in the first degree and accessory after the fact to murder in the first degree, and having entered pleas of not guilty, under our law is presumed to be innocent. She's not required to prove her innocence, and the fact she's been accused is no evidence whatsoever of any guilt. The state having caused the charge to be brought, the state has the sole responsibility of proving guilt if there be any, and the state must prove that to 12 of you. 12 original jurors, beyond a reasonable doubt. Ms. Hayes, being presumed innocent, has no obligation to prove or disprove anything in this courtroom. You have notepads. I suggest that you might want to take advantage of that. Some of you probably are note takers, and some of you probably aren't. But you might want to at least not jot down the name of a witness and anything that significance you think they may have contributed that you might want to remember later. Don't get so caught up in taking notes that you miss something. Sometimes you can get so caught up in note taking that you miss something important. The fact that you write something down doesn't make it important. The fact that you didn't write something down doesn't make it important. Everything is important, and you will all individually and collectively remember all the evidence in the case at the time you deliberate in making your decision. I just want to remind you again, this entire proceeding is being recorded in the media. That's how the public has the right to know what's going on. As I told you earlier, 30 years ago, if you want to walk in the courthouse, sit down on the back row and see what's going on, people did. But now with so many busy lives, that the way they find out what's going on in their community and in their courthouse in cases in which they may have some interest is they turn on the computer, they turn on the TV and watch it just as you're watching it. I tell you that simply to let you know that these proceedings are open. Courts are always open for the public to know how the public's business is being conducted. But you need to be careful that you're not exposed to any of that information, because you have to try this case not on the comments or commentary of some newscaster, but based upon what you see in the courtroom. And therefore, please be careful not to watch anything on TV, don't listen to anything on the radio, don't see anything on your computer. You need to be able to isolate and insulate yourself from exposure to any kind of information being discussed or broadcast about the case. Again, don't go to any alleged crime scene. Don't do any research on your own. Don't get fascinated with some concept that's being discussed and think you need to go Google it and try to educate yourself about it. Don't do that. The rules of the court prohibit you from doing that. Don't do any kind of investigation. Don't read any law. All of you need to hear the same thing. You need to be exposed to only the same information. You need to apply the law that I give to you and not something that you read in a book somewhere. And therefore, the law requires that all of you make your decision based upon what you hear in this courtroom only, and the legal principles that I explain to you only, and therefore that you will collectively and individually make a decision that you find to be a just and fair result under the law and the evidence of this case. The court schedule will be basically, we'll start about 9:30. Please be here on time. If one of you's late, we can't start without you. And if something happens, please call Ms. Vann and let her know so we'll know what your situation is. We'll usually stop for lunch about 1 o'clock. We'll take an hour and 15 minutes or so for lunch. We'll probably stop about 5 o'clock in the afternoon. We may alter this slightly, but not much. We'll take a break in the morning for 15 minutes or so and in the afternoon, but that's going to be our court schedule most of the week. It's winter time. We may have bad weather. If we have bad weather, we will let you know how that impacts on you. So Ms. Vann will be calling you to tell you how bad weather may impact on the court schedule, and I will tell you if I can project far enough ahead of time. But we will keep you informed, and we're not going to ask you to be down here in dangerous conditions or anything like that. If you have some emergency, please call Nancy Vann and the number that she's given you to let us know what your emergency is, and we will adapt or adjust our situation accordingly. The attorneys are now entitled to make, also with regard to the media, please know and understand the rules of the court provide that the media cannot take your picture. No one is going to have, no juror's picture will ever be taken. These are professionals standing back in the back of the courtroom. They know what the rules are. They will not take your picture. In fact, they will make sure they don't. They'll do everything possible not to take your picture, but not to create the impression that your picture is being taken. So don't concern yourself about the fact that the camera's in the courtroom. Don't be distracted by it. Just don't consider it any further. The attorneys are entitled to make opening statements to you now. An opening statement is just that. It's a forecast of what they say, and they contend you're going to hear from their perspective. They're not witnesses. They're not presenting evidence. They're giving you a forecast of what they say the case is about from the perspective of the speaker. What the evidence in fact shows, what the case is in fact about, is for you, the jury, to say and determine, but to help you understand the perspective of both sides from the beginning of the lawsuit, the rules of the court allow the attorneys to make brief opening statements. Mr. Zelling, I believe you are going to speak on behalf of the state.
Yes, sir.
The jury is with you, sir.
I heard her. I hurt her bad. She's dead. Those were the words of Amanda Hayes to her own sister. Those were the words of Amanda Hayes 6 days after Laura Ackerson came over to the apartment that she shared with Grant Hayes. Those are the words of Amanda Hayes hours before she and Grant Hayes deposited Laura's body in a Texas creek. Those were the words of Amanda Hayes 6 days before Laura Ackerson's severed torso would be found. I hurt her. I hurt her bad. She's dead. Now, I want to thank you for sitting through that arduous jury selection process. And as the judge told you, this is an opening statement. This is a forecast of what that evidence will be. And I had the opportunity to talk to some of you during jury selection. My name is Boz Zellinger, and I'm an assistant district attorney here in Wake County, along with Becky Holt, who represent the state of North Carolina. And I want you to pay close attention to the fact that what the judge told you is that the evidence will come from this witness stand. And people are going to come up here and swear to tell you the truth. And they're going to tell you about what they saw and what they heard. And from that story, you're going to learn that on July 13th of 2011, Laura Ackerson woke up excited. She was a 27-year-old mother of 2 little boys, Gentle and Grant IV, and she shared custody of those 2 little boys with Amanda Hayes' husband, Grant Hayes. You'll hear that Grant Hayes and Laura Ackerson had been in a relationship together, and that these 2 boys had been born, and then Grant Hayes left Laura for Amanda Hayes, an actress that Grant met in the U.S. Virgin Islands. But you hear that there was a pretty contentious custody dispute between Amanda and Grant and Laura. And you'll hear a lot about that dispute. You'll hear how there was a custody schedule set up where Grant and Amanda had custody of these 2 little boys from Monday through Friday. And that they would meet Laura at a Sheetz gas station in Wilson, North Carolina, which is pretty close to where Grant and Amanda lived in Raleigh, and Laura lived in Kinston, North Carolina. And so they would meet at that gas station to exchange the kids, and then on Sunday night they would do the same thing to exchange the kids. And you'll hear that Laura was excited because finally things were going her way in this custody dispute. Laura had been a part of this custody evaluation that was conducted by Dr. Ginger Calloway, someone who the court had appointed to determine who should get custody in this litigation that was pending in Kinston, North Carolina. And you'll hear that the custody evaluation made Laura feel pretty good about her chances to get custody back. You'll hear that Laura was excited and she walked out of her apartment. You'll see that she walked past the refrigerator covered with pictures of those little boys. And you'll see that her apartment in Kinston had a huge space devoted to those little boys, just like a huge part of her life was devoted to those little boys. You're going to hear from one of her business associates, Siobhan Mathis, who's actually one of her best friends. You're going to hear Siobhan talk about how Laura and her business was finally getting going, and that Laura had a couple of business meetings that day on July 13th. And you'll hear that their business, which is called Go Fish, sold restaurant menus to restaurants. And they're the kind that have the advertising down the sides. And so they would go to these restaurants and provide the menus for free and sell the advertising to other folks. And you'll hear that on the afternoon of July 13th, Laura went to some of these meetings to talk to various restaurateurs around Kinston. You'll hear that she had a meeting at 2 o'clock, and then you'll hear that she had a meeting at 4 o'clock with Randy Jenkins from Bill's Grill, which is pretty close to Wilson. Pay close attention to how Mr. Jenkins describes Laura, and the fulgence that she demonstrates, how she's very excited because that night she's going to get to see her boys. And we hear that Laura seeing her boys in the middle of the week was a pretty unusual practice, but for some reason she had been invited by Grant to come over to that apartment that Wednesday night. And you'll hear that Laura left that meeting at 4:15 from Bill's Grill and headed right into the teeth of Raleigh traffic on that Wednesday night. And at 4:19 p.m., she called one of her friends, Oksana Samarski. You're going to hear from Oksana. And you're going to get to hear that voicemail. And it's chilling to listen to because you're going to be able to hear the uncertainty in Laura's voice as she talks about how she doesn't know exactly what's going to happen when she goes over to Grant's house. You're then going to hear that she makes another phone call at 4:59 p.m. to Grant Hayes' phone that he and Amanda Hayes share. You're going to hear that that phone call at 4:59 p.m. on Wednesday, July 13th, bounces off a cell phone tower over by Crabtree Valley Mall, the intersection of Beltline and 70 or Glenwood Avenue. You're going to hear that Grant lived further down 70, outbound, away from downtown. And you'll be able to see the distance between that location where her cell phone bounced off the tower and where Grant lived and where she was going. And you'll see that it's just a couple minutes away. And then you're going to find out that Laura went over to that apartment and disappeared. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a case, it's not just about a crime. It's an inhumane crime. This is a case about the killing of a human being and the barbarities and brutalities that Amanda Hayes and Grant Hayes exerted on her body such that she disappeared off the face of the earth for 11 days. So Laura heads over to Grant and Amanda's house that Wednesday night, and no one hears from her again. Meanwhile, at 9:42 that evening, you're going to see some video and some evidence that Amanda Hayes goes to a Chick-fil-A over on Glenwood Avenue, again outbound on 70 near that house. Nearly 4 hours after Laura entered Grant and Amanda's apartment. You're going to see Amanda at that Chick-fil-A with the two little boys, Laura's children, and also Amanda's little girl. For Amanda, a month earlier, had an infant named Lily, and that Grant was the father of. And you're going to see Amanda go in that Chick-fil-A and buy 4 meals. And you'll learn the significance of that. And you'll learn that later that night, at around 1:12 a.m., Grant Hayes makes a purchase at a gas station. You'll learn that at 1:27 and 1:29 a.m. over on Peace Street near Glenwood, they has an ATM withdrawal. And you'll hear that at 2 a.m. that night, Grant Hayes walks into the Walmart in Briar Creek. And you'll see the amount of time that Grant Hayes is out of that apartment. And presumably Amanda and those children and Laura is left there. And you'll hear that Grant walked into that Walmart and purchased a 9 by 12 foot plastic tarp. You'll hear that he bought some goggles, a couple pairs of gloves, hefty contractor extra large garbage bags, and perhaps most importantly, you'll hear that Grant Hayes purchased a skill reciprocating saw with 6-inch blades. And then he also bought some additional blades for that reciprocating saw. And you're going to get to see one of those reciprocating saws. And it's going to be very clear to you what the purpose was for those purchases. And you're going to have to estimate it and listen closely to the amount of time that, again, Amanda Hayes is at home alone with the kids and presumably Laura's body. You're going to learn that she had a cell phone there. Then you're going to hear about the next morning. On July 14th, Siobhan, Laura's good friend, doesn't hear from her, and she starts getting worried. You'll hear about how her worry grows and grows. Meanwhile, you'll find out that Amanda Hayes called her daughter Shay. Now, Amanda has one daughter, Lily, who's around a month old, and you'll hear about Shay, who's around 20 years old at this time. And you'll hear that Amanda asked her daughter to come over to this apartment and take the kids out of the house all day. You hear that these children go to an establishment called Monkey Joe's with Shay. And Monkey Joe's is apparently like a playground indoors for children. That Shay's there nearly all day with these kids, as Amanda has asked her to keep these kids out of the house. You'll hear that when Shay comes back to that apartment, Amanda has another chore for her. She makes her go all the way home and pick up a vacuum cleaner and bring it back to Amanda's house because Amanda and Grant's vacuum cleaner has broken. You're going to hear that on July 15th, Siobhan Mathis's concern grows and grows and grows, and she actually emails Laura, and you'll get to see what that email is. And you'll hear that Siobhan asks, are you okay? Did you lose your cell phone? Something along those lines. It's been 2 days now since she's heard from her business partner and friend. And you'll hear that while she's worrying and sending those emails, Grant Hayes that afternoon at 12:50 goes to Walmart and buys some duffel bags. And then later in that day at 4:30, this is Friday, July 15th, that's when this custody exchange is supposed to happen. So you'll hear that, and you'll see Grant Hayes go to the Sheetz gas station for hours. And you'll see him outside on the phone. Pay close attention to who he's calling at that time. And again, you'll hear that Amanda Hayes is at home alone with her baby and Laura Ackerson's body. After Grant stays at that custody exchange and shockingly Laura doesn't show up, You'll hear that he leaves and comes back, and Saturday, more concern grows for Siobhan. Meanwhile, Grant and Amanda Hayes are around town buying more items, 3 bags of ice, multiple coolers. Pay close attention to where those coolers end up. You'll also hear that Grant and Amanda ask Shay's husband for help installing a trailer hitch onto their Dodge Durango. You're also going to hear something interesting, that Amanda Hayes on that Friday called her sister, Karen Berry, and said, hey, guess what? I'm going to come to Texas. You'll hear that Karen's kind of surprised by this, but is like, okay. And you'll hear that their mother had died a month previous to this, or 2 months earlier, and that Karen presumed that that was the reason that Amanda was going to drive 1,200 miles down to Texas. You'll hear that Saturday that Amanda calls Shay and lets Shay know that they're going to be moving to Kinston that weekend, and they also might be going to Texas. You'll have to peer through all these statements that Amanda makes to her family about going to Texas. But you hear that the preparations for Texas continue, and that Amanda and Grant, eventually Grant heads to the U-Haul facility over here and buys rents a U-Haul trailer to drag behind that Durango. And you're going to get to see his demeanor in that U-Haul facility. You might hear from someone in that U-Haul facility. And you'll see Grant on the phone again, more time, where Amanda Hayes is at home with her cell phone, by herself, with the children, and presumably Laura's body. On Sunday, July 17th, you'll hear that Siobhan's fear has just grown and grown and grown. And she, at that point, calls and emails Laura and sends her an email that says, if you don't respond back to me, I'm going to contact the police. Siobhan actually contacts other folks to find out if Laura picked up the children on Friday, because she knows that those children are the most important thing in Laura Ackerson's life. But she finds out that Laura didn't pick up those children, and she instantly knows something's wrong, bad wrong. Meanwhile, Grant and Amanda are renting a hotel in Montgomery, Alabama, hours and hours away from North Carolina. You'll hear that their cell phones have been off this entire time. And as Sunday turns into Monday, July 18th, you'll hear that Siobhan walks into the Kinston Police Department and reports her friend missing, and Detective Jamie Gortney picks up the case. You'll hear what he does. He talks to Siobhan, he talks to other of Laura's friends, and he tries to figure out what has happened to Laura. Maybe she just took off someplace. He's trying to find out. And as his investigation continues, meanwhile in Texas, 1,200 miles away at 5 a.m., Grant and Amanda show up with the 3 children trailing with a trailer attached to their Durango. And you'll find out that Karen's surprised to see them, but excited to see her sister. And meanwhile, Detective Gortney is contacting local restaurants, trying to figure out who Laura's been with. You'll see the video from Laura's apartment complex where she exits that morning. And you'll find out that when she exited that morning from her apartment complex, she walked out to her white Ford Focus. And you'll hear that a BOLO is issued for that white Ford Focus, for law enforcement officers to be on the lookout for this car. You know that Detective Gortney continues his investigation. And at this point, the Kinston Police Department is concerned about Laura Ackerson. Her friends and family are concerned about her. She has a brother that lives in Wake Forest and some family up in Michigan. And everyone's growing more and more concerned. And you'll hear at this point when the BOLO is released, everyone in the triangle is worried about her. And media reports about where is this car. So Detective Gortney hears about all these custody issues and decides to contact Grant Hayes. Pay close attention to what Grant Hayes tells Detective Gortney. You're going to hear this testimony. You're going to hear that Grant Hayes said that Laura came over to their apartment at 6:40 that day. And you'll be able to compare that to the cell phone records and what time you think she arrived there. You'll hear that Grant stated that Laura left with the boys and then came back to the apartment around 9 or 9:30, and that she left around 10 p.m. You'll hear that Grant also tells Detective Gortney that they're moving to Kinston, but he wants to send Detective Gortney some emails, some correspondence between Laura and Grant. And you'll hear that he says that he has to wait until he gets into better coverage because he's out in the boonies. And Detective Gortney will tell you that he thought this was kind of odd since he didn't really think that Raleigh was out in the boonies or had boonies. But you'll hear that Grant is telling him these things while sitting next to Amanda Hayes in that Durango. You'll hear that the most interesting part of what Grant tells Detective Gortney which is that when Laura arrived, that Amanda took the children and kept them in another room. And you'll think about that. And you'll also hear that Grant told Detective Gortney that Laura had come over to discuss an agreement where Laura was going to keep the kids. So Tuesday, July 19th comes up. Again, the Kinston Police Department is trying to find Laura. And at this point, Detective Gortney comes to Raleigh since he learns that this is the last place that Laura was seen and briefs members of the Raleigh Police Department. You'll hear from some of those folks in the Raleigh Police Department Homicide Unit. And you'll hear what they did after they got this information. Meanwhile, in Texas, you'll learn that Amanda Hayes that morning sits down with her sister and utters those words. I hurt her. I hurt her bad. She's dead. You're going to hear from Amanda's sister, Karen Berry. And you're going to hear about her. You're going to be able to judge her demeanor and hear about the context of this conversation. You'll hear that later that day, Amanda takes some money out of an ATM and that she and Grant end up purchasing a 32-gallon trash can, 4 boxes of muriatic acid, and a couple pairs of gloves. Now in Raleigh, again, the question is rising, where is Laura? The BOLO has been issued. Everybody's searching for Laura. And as the sun sets, you'll hear that in Texas, 1,200 miles away, Amanda Hayes and Grant Hayes go on a boat trip. Across the street from Karen Berry's house, there's a cut through to a little creek called Oyster Creek. You're going to get to see this creek. You're going to get to see the boat that they went in. It's a 12-foot John boat. You're going to get to see where they sat in that boat. You'll hear that they went out on that boat on a nighttime fishing expedition, which seemed pretty odd to the folks down there. Around that time that they went out on that boat, you'll hear that the Raleigh Police Department finds Laura's car. And they find that car in an apartment complex, in a parking space that's not 400 yards from where Amanda and Grant Hayes live. You'll hear that Grant and Amanda return off this evening boat trip, and all of a sudden there's several coolers around Karen Berry's property. Pay close attention to those coolers. You'll hear that after detectives find this car in such close proximity to Amanda Hayes' apartment, that they immediately execute a search warrant into Grant and Amanda's apartment. And when they go in there, right by the front door, there's a big bleach spot. And you'll hear more about that bleach spot. And you'll hear that there's also another bleach spot next to one of the bathrooms. And that it appears that bleach has leaked out from underneath the corners of the door there. You'll get to see pictures of that bathroom. You'll learn that that bathroom was very, very clean. Cleaner than any other room in the house. And you'll learn that there are some things missing from that bathroom. Shay will testify that missing from that bathroom is a shower rod, a shower curtain, bath mats. Those are all gone. You'll wonder where they went. You'll hear that later on that day, detectives from the Raleigh Police Department continue their investigation after they execute that search warrant. And you'll hear that all roads at this point are leading them to Texas. You'll find out that they pinged Grant Hayes' phone, the phone that he shared with Amanda Hayes. And what that means is, and you'll learn about this technology, that through the phone company, they're able to find the GPS coordinates of that phone. And you'll see where those GPS coordinates come up. And that Tuesday, it ends up right in the backyard of Karen Berry. And then that Wednesday, you'll hear that, again, Amanda talks to her sister Karen Berry, and Karen, as Amanda's saying that she's leaving to come back to North Carolina because she has to meet with Laura, which Karen finds odd based on everything else that's happened down there. You'll hear that at that point, Karen asks Amanda, are you covering for Grant? And Amanda, on her way out the door, nods her head. Pay close attention to the context of those conversations and how the day before, Amanda Hayes had told Karen, I hurt her bad, she's dead. So at that point, you'll hear that detectives leave North Carolina, and 2 homicide detectives from the Raleigh Police Department, Detective Dexter Gill, Detective Bobby Latour, head to Texas, and they drive down there. They leave on that Friday evening. You'll hear that at the same time, that Wednesday, Amanda and Grant take the U-Haul trailer back to the U-Haul facility in Texas, and then they start driving back towards North Carolina. And like ships passing in the night, on that Friday, as detectives head to Texas, Grant and Amanda arrive back in North Carolina. And you'll hear that at that point a search warrant is executed on them. Pay close attention to what's taken. There's some digital evidence. Pay close attention to that. Meanwhile, detectives drive through the night and arrive in Texas on the Saturday evening. And at that point, they go to sleep and wake up the next Sunday morning and head to Karen Berry's house. Now at this point, Grant tells them about some of the things that occurred, about how Karen walked around the property with Grant and Amanda, as Grant and Amanda asked if there was a septic tank or a hole someplace or a river, looking for some deep place. And you'll hear also that Karen told them, I can't stand the thought of standing in court and facing my sister after this, but I've got to do what's right. Please take care of her when you pick her up, please. And you'll hear that Karen then tells more of this story. And she'll come on this witness stand and tell you more about it. And at that point, the question in detectives' heads of where is Laura is leading them across the street from Karen Berry's house. And you'll hear that they call some other investigators from the Fort Bend County Sheriff's Office to go across that street into that river. And you'll see that creek, it's called Oyster Creek, is covered with vines and foliage. You hear the water is 89 degrees. And you'll hear from investigator Kim Oreskovich, who takes a boat out into that river with a Richmond Fire Department member. And there, for all of Laura's family and friends, for Siobhan, for the Kinston Police Department, for folks in the Triangle, for the Raleigh Police Department, there our worst fears are realized. For there in the middle of that creek lies Laura Ackerson's severed torso. Her head has been cut off. Her arms have been cut off. Her torso is split in half. You'll hear the efforts that these investigators take to pull these body parts out of the water. And you'll hear that later on that Sunday night, Amanda and Grant Hayes are both arrested in Kinston. You'll hear how the next day, part of Laura's leg is found. And later on, members of the Houston dive team find Laura's decapitated head. Pay close attention to the testimony about Laura's head. You're going to hear, and you might see some pictures of the area, but listen to the testimony about that and how the condition of that head differs from the rest of her body. You're going to hear from several folks from Texas, including the medical examiner down there, Dr. Nabi Mambo, who performs a first autopsy on these body parts. And then you'll hear that Laura's body was returned home to North Carolina. And then when it came back here to North Carolina, it was taken to the North Carolina Medical Examiner's Office, led by Dr. Debbie Radish. And you're going to hear her testify. You're also going to hear from Dr. Ginger Calloway, who did that custody evaluation between Grant and Amanda. Pay close attention to her testimony. This whole time you'll wonder who could do this to Laura, who could do such an inhumane thing as murdering someone and then cutting them apart. You'll get to see Laura's diary. Laura's diary where she states that Amanda calls her psycho crazy, that Amanda looks at her with disdain, that Amanda says, I'm now responsible for your kids because you're psycho crazy. You're also going to see in that diary many things about Grant Hayes and the bitter, contentious custody dispute that Amanda and Grant were having with Laura Ackerson. You also hear that Laura writes in there, I'm afraid to approach the subject with Grant and Amanda. They act as though I don't exist. And the whole time you'll be wondering, who would want to do this and make Laura disappear for 11 days? You'll hear Laura wrote, I've done nothing to Amanda but to them I am psycho crazy. It's discouraging to deal with them about my children. Ladies and gentlemen, you're going to hear about how this custody dispute grew more and more contentious. You're going to hear how angry and resentful Amanda and Grant were that Laura Ackerson was calling them every day and emailing them, trying to get in touch with her children. This isn't going to be a trial where we attempt to determine who struck the fatal blow or who cut Laura's arms off, who cut her legs off, who cut her head off. You're going to hear more about the 11 days between the time that Laura went over to Grant and Amanda's house and when she disappeared off the face of the earth. You're going to hear more about the 6 days between the time that she went over to Grant and Amanda's house and Grant and Amanda went out in that boat ride. You're going to hear more about the bitter custody dispute, and you're going to learn that on July 13th of 2011, there were 3 adults in that apartment. One is dead, one has been tried for murder, and the other one is here before you. You're going to learn that Amanda Hayes is an actress, that she trained as an actress, that she performed as an actress, and that she attempted to make a living as an actress. Ladies and gentlemen, this isn't a case about movies, and this isn't a movie. This isn't a stage. This is a case about a murdered young mother, the 2 young boys that will never see her again, and the role that Amanda Hayes had in her death. Thank you.
All right. Mr. Haskins, do you have remarks?